Welcome to episode 39 of the Be Life podcast, coming to you from Canton Nazarene Church. I'm Joe Palmisano, and this is Josh Potts. Zach is behind the screen, not the screen. He's not the Wizard of Oz.
I mean, he kind of is.
Zach Richards is behind the camera. He is producing the show today. And I have an announcement to make. I have to tell you this, and I want you to bear with me. You think, and for you out there is nothing worse than, the worst thing is not believing in something, not having something that you believe in, that you could anchor into, that everything is kind of wishy-washy and nebulous and here and there, and you're like a leaf in a hurricane. Well, the other worst thing, the second almost as bad, is believing something but not knowing what you believe. Does that make sense to you?
That's fair.
It's fair, but does it make sense?
Yeah, I mean, those two things you said make sense. I'm curious where you're going with it.
Okay, here's the thing. Well, last week and the week before, when we started talking Revelation, I believe in Revelation. I didn't know what I believed and what I didn't believe. I believe in an end times. And this even went back to Mark. When I talked to Mark about eschatology. And so I have the great privilege of being retired. And so aside from doing certain things at the church, a podcast and a blog and other things, and working with Bungoma in the ministry, I have a lot of time to read and study. So I spent this week reading through the book of Revelation.
The whole thing?
Well, I read through it first.
Okay.
Just read through it.
Yeah.
Then I went and hit all the key points that I needed to know. Not for any particular reason. I needed to know what I believed.
Yeah, just to satisfy your curiosities.
Well, and to have an anchor point. So I went and I studied all these, and I didn't go and do other scholars. I didn't go do, read up from what other people thought, the commentaries and all those things. I discovered one thing that we talked about this once, but Revelation is so tied to the Old Testament. And so I realized that, and I started putting everything together and started reading and it was awesome. I love doing this. So I'm giving you everything I believe right now, literally.
Okay. Are we going to make like a bulleted list?
We don't have to.
Okay.
We could go do whatever. I'm just telling you what I am going to anchor in right now. Now, the reason I say this is not to be right. It's not because ultimately, I don't know that anything I know is the ultimate truth until I meet Jesus, until I know, and maybe, hopefully then, he will impart his wisdom and I'll understand all this. So I'm not saying these things that I'm to try and say I'm right, to try and say that this is everybody should believe this. You find out for yourself, and you have your own anchors. These are mine. I now can say without a doubt that I take Revelation literally.
Okay.
Now, that means I take that there is a past, present, and future, that the future is going to happen. I believe in a rapture. I believe in a millennial kingdom. I believe in a 7-year tribulation. I believe that the 144,000 were literally 144,000 Jewish people, from Israel. part of that Israeli family, the Israelites, the family. I believe in the two witnesses, that they actually were on earth, that they actually rose from the dead, and they were actually called into heaven. I believe in all those things. And I take those things, and it's, Josh, it's such a good feeling, not to say I'm dogmatic about this, but to say that now I know why I believe what I believe and what I believe. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Okay.
I know we may differ, and the point is not to say you're different. Oh, I found this out. You're wrong, because I didn't listen to anybody else. This is just me praying and asking God for direction in this for my life. And so that's where we're at. I just wanted, and then now I'm willing to sit back and listen to what you have to say and teach about the creatures and about everything else about the main characters in Revelation. And I could do that with a peace, not wanting to say, "Oh, what do you believe?" Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I don't know where you want to go today, so
Yeah. Well, I don't like that you said while you teach, because I don't want to be like giving a lecture.
All right.
I like having a conversation about it. And I think that there are a series of lectures and podcasts and well thought out textbooks about the subject that teach far better than I ever could. I just want to share some of my thoughts and the things that stand out to me, and I want to have some conversations about
Awesome.
it and that sort of thing. But I'm not going to claim to have like the systematic comprehensive interpretation of this book.
Yeah.
But I do find it interesting that you started with the claim, I take it literally.
I do.
And then listed off maybe a dozen things of the hundreds of things in here.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm curious why those things stood out to you.
That's a great point, because I don't take literally the beast as being literal beast. I see John as seeing it and being shown that as a way for him to understand who that was. So you're right. I don't take all those facts literally. I guess those things stood out to me as being important to the overall message. For instance,
yeah,
the witnesses, the two witnesses, and the 144,000, I think, are crucial to the evangelism of the Jewish race.
Okay.
During that time.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. Why?
To reaching the world. I mean, God said at the end, the gospel will be preached in every corner of the world, and then the end will come. And I truly believe that the 144,000, that the 144,000, it's interesting, we're also mentioned in Zechariah. And so I look at that as saying this was God's charge. It's not all the people that are going to be in. It's not. It's just this sealed group of believers.
So you're saying that your interpretation is not that is a finite number?
No.
So
no, it isn't. That is a finite number. That is 12,000 from every tribe,
and not a drop more.
Well, no, more will come in, but those are the ones that were sealed for evangelism, for missionary work, to get the word out to the rest of the Jews at that time, the rest of the chosen people. God used those 144,000 and sealed them,
yeah,
protected them, and they went out and they were there to take the word boldly during the tribulation. These are people that were saved maybe right at the beginning of the tribulation, or even when the rapture happened and they were jealous of what was going on. So I believe that they started being saved. God chose the cream of the crop. God sealed those people and said, I want you to go out and preach to your fellow Israelites, your fellow Jews, and to convert them and teach them and tell them about what is going on. That this isn't just something naturally happening. This is God's wrath upon you. And I believe that they went out to do that just like the two witnesses did.
All right. So you've used the language of end and future, but then as you were talking there, you were using all past tense verbiage. Are you saying that these literal 144?
No, this will happen.
Okay. All right. So the 144,000 set apart Jews that will belong to God in the future,
that will be used by God in the future, that are just sealed, not.
So those numbers aren't referring to our brothers and sisters in Christ who are Jewish living today.
Our brothers and sisters who are Jewish living in Christ today will be part of the rapture. They will go when Christ comes.
Will go.
Will be called up to the sky to meet with God when he comes back, when Jesus Christ comes back.
All right.
Yeah. So those won't be here. Those won't be here. And then we're also going to have a population that makes it through the tribulation and populates the millennial kingdom on earth.
Okay. All right. All right. I think I'm following some of that.
Okay.
When you had talked to me this week about wanting to see the bigger picture of the book. And as I thought through the bigger picture of the book and consulted some texts and some scholars on the subject, the 144,000 number and the term rapture and the millennial reign were not terms that were anywhere in these summaries that I found this week.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
We don't have to cover those today.
Okay.
I'm just telling you what I didn't want to tell you that to throw you and say, we have to talk about these right now. If it spurs you to want to talk about something, that's fine. But that wasn't my point. My point was to tell you where I'm coming from.
Okay.
What I think I believed this before, but I had to refresh myself.
Okay.
And just where I am as far as the book of Revelation. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of saying, all right, we got to talk about this, Josh. I'm ready to put that off somewhere down the line, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I didn't want to hijack.
No, you're good.
I'm not trying to hijack what you had planned, because I think what you have planned is probably very important.
Well, I think it's good whenever we approach any book of the Bible to recognize the assumptions that we are bringing to the text.
Yes.
Sometimes those assumptions could be from spiritual formation in our lives through respectful means, from instructors and teachers and preachers that have done their work. And sometimes those assumptions that we bring to the text can be very valid, and that historians, biblical scholars, the text itself all validate those assumptions. Other times we can have assumptions that we bring to the text that the text nowhere supports.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that can really throw us off. Sometimes it can lead us to spiral where we think, well, if I was wrong about this, was I right about anything? Is everything I know completely wrong? And that's
kind of where I was last week.
There's definitely some times I've started on that spiral. I've never let it fully consume me, but I've had some conversations with people who have literally walked away from the faith because they started on that spiral and let it get out of control. And they don't know what they believe, and they're fine in that agnosticism, just not being certain and being okay with not thinking through those things.
How can you do that? How can you How can you bypass a relationship with Jesus Christ because of certain things that, see, if I was wrong about rapture, that wouldn't cause me to not have a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Have you ever done a thought experiment to think about what idea, if the rug was pulled out from under you, would topple your faith?
That's an interesting question. And right now I'm trying to think. And I don't, aside from a revelation from God, or God coming down and saying Jesus Christ was a lie.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that on earth. That's why even when I was studying this, I didn't want to go to scholars and I didn't want to go to commentaries. I just kept praying and saying, Lord, you show me.
Mm-hmm.
Show me what you want me to see. Now, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but I believe he probably did for me. And everything that he showed me with different forms, and you talked about the 144, the witness rapture, the whole thing. To me, every one of those things is a rung in the ladder that gets me to the end of Revelation. There's not one rung that seems out of place.
Okay.
Whereas they did before.
Yeah.
But do I take it, again, do I take everything literally? No. I don't think there's anything in this that I could not believe, or I could be wrong about, or I could get confused about that would cause me to lose faith in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Is there one with you?
In the book of Revelation, I suppose, if an idea I understood that was really going to throw me off, I understand that the slain lamb in the book of Revelation represents the king of our faith, the man that we often call Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth. I believe that that's who that figure represents. And I think that if that figure wasn't coming about and bringing justice that was true divine justice, but instead was personal vengeance, I think I would be done. I think if someone told me that the leader, the king of the good, and that's the thing, is you have this very, very polarized book. The book of Revelation is written in the tradition of apocalypsis. We talked about this 2 episodes ago. That genre of literature came out very predominantly of the Babylonian exile of the Jewish people. And at that time, their faith was very influenced by a Persian religion known as Zoroastrianism that wanted to present this dichotomy of deity, that there was a God of good and a God of evil. And that begins to shape some of the New Testament writings in ways that the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament was not specifically shaped. And I think that if this king of good, this absolute king of good, the lamb, and then you have the king of evil, the dragon, I think that if the lamb was not actually bringing true justice and goodness, but was bringing a personal vendetta to take out the dragon because he had a beef with him, I'd have a problem with that. And
Yeah,
I think,
but I don't see how you could ever see that in any of the scripture.
Well, there are people who interpret Revelation that way, that God is bringing death and destruction and judgment on those who don't live the way he told them to live, on those who don't believe what he told them to believe, on those who didn't understand the mysteries hidden in his word, and that, oh, you didn't make the cut, so here is famine and hail and fire and death.
This is a very good conversation, because it a lot of it goes back to the Old Testament, some of it goes back to Romans, it goes back to different places where you see this here and there. I choose to believe that my God is a holy God. He cannot put up with or be in the presence of evil. He is a holy God, pure. He gives us over our lifetime, over the life of the world, from Genesis to Revelation, he gives us opportunities to to come around. He tells us, he gives us the law. The law then reveals sin in our lives. Sin was there before because death was there, but he revealed it when the law was given. But he doesn't force men to do what he wants. That's to me, that's the wonderful thing about our God, is that men still have free will. But he says in Romans 1, and this is when I look, and I just happen to have it right here, but the wrath of God is being revealed continuously. That's what that means, is being continuously revealed from heaven against all godlessness and wickedness of people, who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God had made it plain to them. Now it goes on and on. But man chooses. We see the earth. We see the glory of God in the daylight, in everything that takes place. The fact that we're not spinning off of this planet. And he gives us an opportunity to come around. I don't believe Revelation is God beating on man and saying, you did not come along. You did not follow what I told you. Here's my commandments. You didn't follow them. I believe that God is saying, you chose to do this. When he says the wrath of God is continuously revealed, I truly believe that most of the wrath that we experience in this lifetime when we don't obey God is the wrath that comes from us not following his own manual. We disobey. You have disease. You have venereal disease that people get. I mean, let's be honest. You have venereal disease that people get. You have all these things. Are those God's torment on man? Well, if I choose to do that and I bring that on myself, whose fault is that? Is that God beating me up, or is it me being stupid and not following God's directive of how I should live so that I live in joy? If I go after riches and I make that my solid goal, and because of that, I walk on people and I hurt people. And then suddenly, somewhere along the line, it all comes back to haunt me. And I'm empty and I'm broken and I'm disease ridden and I've got a lot of money, but I live in this house all by myself. And I'm lonely and I'm old. Whose fault is that? So in Revelation, the people that the blood and the emptying of the wrath, is it so much God judging, or is it man judging himself? Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah. I mean, a lot of the things described as God's judgment in the book of Revelation are sort of natural phenomenon, things that are natural consequences.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I tend to believe very similar to what you were describing there. I just think if I was given a convincing argument that really did, penetrate my belief to its core and convince me that God was just out for personal vengeance, I think that would.
I don't think you're going to find that.
Well, I have yet to, right? I've been I've been pretty adamantly searching the scriptures and testing it and testing who God is, philosophically, abstractly, but also personally in my own life.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for as long as I can remember. And I still hopefully have a bunch of years ahead of me to keep doing that. But as of right now, I've only just been more solidified in my faith.
Yeah.
And I think that careful examination of the scriptures and that rehearsal of doing it on my own, choosing to read the books, choosing to read the Bible, and to have conversations like these strengthens me to to be able to respond better when I do come across a conversation, an insight, a study, an archaeological unearthing that might throw a wrench into the narrative that I've constructed in my head or the set of beliefs that I've built up. I can say, hey, you know what? Let's maybe accept that truth. Maybe let's weigh it against what I know or what I thought I knew before. Like, I'm willing to do that work of examining it.
Is that tiring? Is that a burden to you?
It's as tiring as working out is, right? You go to the gym to work out and it's exhausting. And then afterwards, like, whew, I feel good.
Yeah.
Like, why don't I do this more often? It's that same sort of thing. Like, yeah, it's absolutely tiring.
Well,
and it takes intellectual work. And then at the end, hopefully you feel better.
This week was like that for me. That's why I had to share that with you.
Yeah.
And I've done this before when I've shared things with you where I've spent the whole week looking at something. But the one part, the bottom line kind of thing is that there is nothing, I don't think there's anything ever that could destroy my relationship with Jesus Christ. And maybe because, Josh, that I've been through all those things. I've questioned, I've been through est, I've been through transcendental meditation. I've been through all those things. I've searched all those things. I've gone the opposite way as you, whereas you have kind of always had a relationship with Jesus.
Absolutely.
And now and so in your life, you're trying to say, why have I had this relationship with Jesus all my life? There's got to be something here. I've gone the opposite, where I've said, there is no Jesus Christ. There is no God. It's something that the church invented to keep me jumping from one foot to the other and all this stuff. And so when I finally found Jesus, it's rock solid.
Yeah.
Because I've been there. So
if I can be completely honest, I a lot of times experience envy when I hear people giving their testimony about how they were far from God and how they tried different ways of looking at the world, or they tried different ways of satisfying their cravings, and then eventually made their way to God, and they felt a peace that they had never felt before. Well, I was born with spiritual privilege. I was born into a family with a strong faith, and I've never been apart from God. I've never even doubted my faith.
Yeah.
Like, I have gone out of my way to actively test my faith. I've gone through the last decade. I have very actively deconstructed my faith. I know why I believe everything I believe to the best of my knowledge. I mean, I'll continue to do that work, but it's more than your average Christian by quite a bit. I know why I believe what I believe, and why some things I hold close-handed and other things I say, hey, this is my best understanding for now, but I might be wrong. And I've done all that work because from the beginning, I've been at this point of, I have a relationship with God. Jesus came and made a way for me to be with God because God loves me and wants me to live not only a beautiful life here on earth, but eternally with him. That's always been my point of view. And so I feel like I have to test it.
You see, I envy, and it's funny because we envy each other. I envy you because you've spent your life not wasting it doing other things. My wife's the same way. Kirby was raised in the church, and she's always known a relationship with Jesus Christ. So things become, to her, all the stuff that I do is kind of majoring in minors, she says, where I'm constantly trying to, I wrap my hand, mine's the opposite. I know my faith is strong. My faith in Jesus Christ will, I don't care what anybody does to me, death, life, no matter what. My relationship with Jesus Christ is solid, but I want to know, I don't want to believe just because I'm supposed to believe. Just like this week, I have to say, what do I believe?
Yeah.
And do I believe it solidly?
Well, and you had said that a lot of the beliefs that you hold now about this text, you believe are the ones that you held before. It sort of reinforced it, and that's okay. Even if you're doing that work and you come out on the other side and you're like, I don't think anything's changed, at least you've done the work of figuring it out for yourself, and that's huge.
I'm more solid than I was.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever had I believed those things because I'm just kind of I take the Bible somewhat literally, except for freaky things like beasts and stuff. But other than that, I take the Bible literally.
Yeah.
And so that's easy. But I did believe these things. I took them, believed them, taking them for granted.
Mhm.
Now I feel like I believe them, like they're solid in me. Are they right? I don't know. I won't know until I see God, until I see Jesus and say, was this real? Oh no, you really blew this one. But that's fine. So this is a great conversation to have, because as you look at the book of Revelation, the book of Revelation brings these types of discussions out like no other.
Mhm.
I mean, everything else, when you read John and it says the Word was with God, the Word was God, you go, yeah, we pretty much can agree with that, what the Word is and what that means, that he was always with God and he was there from the beginning. But you start getting into Revelation, and you start getting into the bloodshed, and you start getting into the judgment, and you start getting into all the things that are going on in this book. It brings these discussions alive, and it's not a bad thing. What a way to end it! What a way to end the Bible, is to say, okay, we've gone through this whole thing from Genesis, the story of his history throughout the Old Testament, New Testament, how it all fits. That's the other thing that came out of this, is realizing how much of the prophets spill over.
Almost entirely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost as if the author of Revelation didn't have a unique thought, right? He was just sort of repackaging and he was making a mixtape of the prophecies of the Old Testament.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then you start looking at, if it does it for Revelation, it probably does it for Matthew, for Luke, for John, for the epistles, for everything. They all draw on the Old Testament. But for one thing, that's their heritage.
Mm-hmm.
For the another thing is that God intended it that way. He wanted to show that there is a continuity of his message over thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Each one of the books of the Bible is written in a different genre, to a different audience, by a different author, at a different time, for a specific reason that was different. Yet they all fit together to construct one cohesive narrative, one relatively consistent teaching. And I think that there's so much beauty in that. And I have an absolute adoration for the Holy Scriptures because of that. I think there's so much uniqueness to each of the books. I think that you can find different poetic schemes. You can find different imagery that really stands out, that can set a book apart. Some of us are definitely drawn to some books rather than others, yet it all works together to tell one cohesive story. And I think that is such a beautiful thing. And I think that, honestly, over the years, I've learned to appreciate the editorial process of assembling the canon, perhaps more than the writing of the original texts. We always talk about that God inspired the men and perhaps women who wrote these books originally. I think God inspired the men and women who assembled these books into the canon. Absolutely. And who translated them and who put together commentaries. And I think that all of that together is the Holy Scriptures. And I think there's so much beauty in that.
Yeah. What is your favorite book?
My favorite, for a long time, I really loved the book of Proverbs, because for a long time I viewed the Bible as its primary purpose was a grab bag of wisdom, because that's the way we treat it a lot of times on Sunday mornings. It's just like, we're going to be talking about X topic, and we're going to open up to this book and read these 3 verses, and that gives us advice on this topic. And so I'm like, bro, Proverbs doesn't even take 3 verses. In one verse, he just gives you the bottom line like that. And I'm like, I love that. He gets to the point. As I've gotten older, ironically, right after Proverbs, Ecclesiastes is a book that is all skepticism. And so all the straightforwardness of Proverbs is immediately all questioned in the book following it. And it really stands out to me.
It's by the same person, apparently.
It's in the same tradition.
Is it by the same author?
In the same tradition. So
explain that.
A lot of the Bible is pseudopographic, I guess is how you'd say that. There's a lot of books of the Bible that are attributed to certain faith leaders that they might not have written it. Some of them, we know for a fact they did not write it, but it was their teaching and their influence on members of the church or members of the community that follow God who then eventually wrote it down. We know that the literal written prophets and the historical books of the Bible were not written down until hundreds of years later during the exile.
Okay.
So we know that it was written in the tradition of them, but not specifically by those authors.
Interesting. So the tradition of Solomon was in both Proverbs and Ecclesiastes.
And the Song of Songs.
So do you find it odd that the same person that was inspiring the knowledge and the wisdom in Proverbs also was the guy just wrecking, just a wreck?
Maybe it's me projecting my own personal experience onto the text, but I feel like Proverbs was like when he was young and naive, and then as he got older, he's like, nope, I gave you this hard, fast rule, and I found out it does not always work, and here's some of the reasons why.
Yeah.
So I don't know. At least that's what I've experienced as I've read it. I've become more skeptical as I've grown older, and so the skepticism in Ecclesiastes appeals to me.
I find it interesting that your two favorite books are in the Old Testament. I would have, I immediately go to Romans.
Yeah.
I love the book of Romans. I think it's just like, it's packed with everything. I'm beginning to enjoy Revelation.
Revelation's fun.
Well, I don't know if it's fun. It's agonizing to me, but it's
in a good way. It's like watching. It's like watching like a thriller, a scary movie. Yeah. Yeah, it's scary imagery, but it's fun to like experience that.
But it's reality.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah.
It's reality. It's going to happen. And so there's a part of me that's okay. There's an urgency to warn people.
Yeah.
About the path that they're taking or we're taking.
Yeah.
Thank God I had a wife who nurtured me through all my junk and introduced me to the Lord. But now I've got to be that person to someone else.
Yeah.
And so Revelation does that. It's more of an urgent.
Yeah.
The time is now. We talked about this last week or the week before. It's the next great event.
Yeah. Yes, there's certainly a sense of urgency. And when you go to the end of the book of Revelation, you have that literally spelled out for you. In the last chapter, in chapter 22, we have just a sense of urgency. The subheading in my particular Bible just says, Jesus is coming.
Yes.
And it's repeated again and again. Like, tell people, don't take away from this truth. This is an important message. It's happening. There's a sense of urgency to this message.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why Revelation, one of the many reasons why Revelation can stir up so many feelings for the readers.
Yeah.
So as we've talked about broadly why we appreciate the scripture, your journey you had with the book of Revelation this week, before we finish things up today, I do want to talk about the overall story of the book of Revelation before we continue next week into more of the details of particular characters and particular events and symbols. We do want to hit this overarching, what is the point? What is the story?
That.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. The book of Revelation is broken up into several sections. The first one is the introduction to the book, Jesus meeting John. We talked about this a little bit last week. And then he gives him 7 letters to 7 churches in Asia Minor. And there is a lot of wisdom in these letters. There's a lot of warning in these letters. And there's some encouragement in these letters. From those letters through the next, through pretty much the remainder of the book, we explore some of the invisible things that are being discussed in those letters. Oftentimes you talk about, you were surprised that my favorite books were from the Old Testament. A lot of people are drawn to letters of the New Testament. A lot of times the Pauline epistles, Paul's letters to the churches, because it's full of practical advice, because it talks about your faith and your belief and how to live with one another and how to do church well and how to live in your community well. Very practical advice. And people can read it into their own lives.
But it's also very much doctrine. Most of
Yeah.
Paul's letters start out very doctrinally strong.
Yes.
And then, therefore, he
Yes.
goes into practical
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. He gives a reason why we believe what we believe, and therefore how it should impact our lives. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times in that and instruction in the doctrinal portions are those references to the Old Testament.
Yes.
Maybe I like the Old Testament because it's like the OG, like that's
Yeah.
actually, that's where
I get that.
that's where they're getting their wisdom from. But Paul's letters will talk about some of the spiritual implications of our actions. And this is very reflective of the prophets in the Old Testament. The books of the prophets are descriptions of sometimes crazy, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes scary, sometimes exciting images to describe what is happening before them, whether it's what's happening in the present, what has happened in the past, or what will happen in the future. And we have a definition. For years I taught kids church, and our definition of prophecy was this: a specific message from God to a particular people given through a person. And that person is the prophet. The prophecy is a specific message from God for specific people, oftentimes at a specific time. A lot of times we like to secularize prophecy. Here's maybe a less loaded example. In pop culture, when people were to make artwork of an angel, what would it look like?
Something with wings and a halo.
Yeah. Halo, wings, a handsome looking dude, maybe a lady.
Or a stick figure even.
If you're one of those artists.
Case.
That imagery comes from Roman paganism. In the Bible, halos and wings, that's not what angels look like. Angels oftentimes in the biblical narrative are just mistaken for people. They look like average Joes. Sometimes they're described as wearing white or the glory of the Lord shining from them. But other than that, they just look like people. But we've allowed this pagan imagery to capture our imaginations and really dominate it, and sometimes impact the way that we interpret the text that's before us. The same is true when it comes to prophecy. When we think about someone giving a prophecy, we think about it is a revealing of a future event. It's fortune telling, right? That's a lot of times in pop culture what we think about when we think of prophecy. In the Bible, that's not what prophecy is. It's not fortune telling. Sometimes it can reveal things that have not yet come. Absolutely. Other times prophecy is about something that happened in the past. One of my favorite prophecies comes from, I hate saying that it's my favorite. After David rapes a woman and impregnates her and murders her husband, so all of that heinous, then a prophet comes to him and tells one of my favorite prophecies. So I don't like the situation that it's in, but I like his words. And he says that a man had a sheep that he loved, and that sheep would lay in bed with him, and that sheep would eat at his table with him. And another man came and killed that sheep. And I love the story because I just imagine a sheep in bed and a sheep eating at a table, and it just makes me giggle because I love my dogs in that same sort of way. Like I literally, my one little Jack Russell will sit on a chair at our dining room table, and he just sits there and watches us eat. And we just pretend like he's a little person with us. So I think it's funny. In that context, Nathan was describing the actions David had already committed in the past and condemning them and saying, hey, I'm just going to give you a heavenly perspective. And I'm going to let you know that the condemnation of your actions is not from me. I'm a prophet. The condemnation of your actions is coming from God. So a lot of times the larger, what we call the major prophets, the larger books of prophecy in the Old Testament are full of God's thoughts, God's condemnation, God's praise of a situation that is currently or has already happened. And sometimes it has to do with events of the future.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So bring it back to Revelation. We get to these first couple of the chapter 2, where we have these letters to the churches, and these are functioning a lot like the letters of the New Testament, like Paul's epistles, but then they're also in the same tradition as the prophets, where the book is going to go on to describe all of these invisible things that are happening that have resulted in the physical things that are happening in these letters. So there's an invisible world, a spiritual world that is always at play. And the author of Revelation, John, is saying these invisible things that are always at play are happening right now behind the scenes of your church who's struggling with these things.
Now, can I ask you another question or just interject this?
Yeah.
We also know that the 7 is complete.
Mm-hmm.
It's throughout the Bible, throughout especially Revelation, 7 means this is it. It's final. This is completion. I have is that the same with these churches? It's talking about those particular churches, but it's also a prophecy to us, telling us about our churches.
Yes. Okay. So there are 4 main interpretations of the book of Revelation. One of them is very prominently held by historians and scholars who are Christian. And then another one is held very prominently by historians and scholars who are skeptical or not Christian. It's funny how people sort of flock to these different interpretations.
But why do I care about the people who are skeptical and aren't Christian and what they say about it?
Because the toilet was invented by someone who is a skeptical non-Christian, right?
Okay.
Skeptical non-Christians still give us good things.
All right.
I was invented by pagan Greeks, so I'm assuming they're not Christian. That is quite the assumption.
I can live with that. I like that.
Okay. So the interpretive camp that I tend to fall into, and that the historians, scholars, authors that I most respect tend to fall into, would be a preterist / idealist interpretation. The preterist interpretation is saying that the book of Revelation is written to these 7 churches that were living under Roman occupation to give them encouragement and wisdom and hope for the future as they were living under Roman occupation.
I could believe that. I believe that.
The idealist interpretation is to say this is written to 7, which we know is a symbolic number. So it's not just written to these churches living underneath Roman occupation, but it's also written to you and me living under the American Empire.
Giving us encouragement.
Yeah.
As to what will come.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so most of the far more educated than I am individuals who work in this field and interpret this text tend to fall in one of or a combination of those 2 interpretive fields.
I think I fall there.
Okay.
I think
as we explore it further, you may or may not, but that's
where I fall right now.
Okay. You feel comfortable with that. You feel like there's some
stand right there, right in between both of those.
Yeah.
I choose to.
So then the rest of the book of Revelation, chapters 4 through 22, are talking about what is happening in the invisible. And it is doing 2 things in the tradition of some of the prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel. It is talking about both what is happening in the invisible right now in their context, 2,000 years ago. And it's saying what's happening there is a reflection of what will happen in an ultimate future. So God is at work fighting evil forces now in your life, and in an ultimate future, it will come to a completion, and death and hell will be cast into the lake of fire.
Okay. I see it as there's a point where we're talking here about the churches. There's a point right after he gets done showing John, Jesus reveals all the things, the letters he wants him to deliver to the churches and all that. But then he says, come up here.
Yeah, so there's a door standing open in heaven, and he calls them on up.
Yeah. Now he calls them up, and John's in the presence of Jesus Christ. He falls on his face as if dead. He has to be encouraged to get up. It's me. He sees Jesus in his present role as high priest and king of the churches, because we just got done talking about the churches, and now he sees the lampstands and everything. So I believe he's showing him the present. And I'm looking at Revelation itself, where it says, the revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I have to show you this. Here's where I am now. I'm letting you get a peek into where I am now, but I'm also showing you what's going to take place. And then he said, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and take heart what is written, because the time is near.
Yeah.
And then one more, where he says, what is now and what will take place later. So what he's showing him is now, and now I'm going to show you how it all ends.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So someone who's looking through the preterist interpretive lens will say, look, right there, it says these are things that are going to happen soon. The images written throughout chapters 4 through 22, very clearly describing the empire of Rome and its leaders, very clearly describing its malpractice that was condemned by believers, condemned by most of the world, very clearly talking about Rome, and eventually Rome was destroyed. So a preterist interpreter will say, look, it was talking about Rome, Rome got its comeuppance and was destroyed. The end. An idealist will say, yeah, look, it did happen soon for them, and it happened soon for the British Empire, and it happened soon for the French Empire, and it will happen soon for the American Empire. And we can find rhythms in it that we can apply to our current day and age, and have been for the last 2,000 years.
Okay. But with the Roman Empire and all these, I guess I'm looking at it and seeing the seals,
Mm-hmm.
the lampstands, the bowls,
Yeah.
the trumpets, the judgments, the earthquakes,
Yeah. All of those. A preterist person will look at those and say those are all things that happened against Rome. That was the judgment of God, and that the most powerful empire in the world fell.
Yeah, but you can't buy that, because the world didn't end. When the Roman Empire ended, the world didn't end.
Sure.
God didn't come back. Christ didn't come back. He didn't come and gather his people. There wasn't a rapture. Christ didn't come in the clouds. People didn't see him. It says Christ will come in the clouds, and the people will see him, and and even those who pierced him will see him.
Okay, so just as you said, you don't believe in a literal beast that comes up from a pit from the middle of the earth, that's figurative. People who are reading Revelation through the preterist perspective will say it's also figurative of the rider on the white horse coming through the clouds.
Well, because it doesn't, the beast is not telling you who the beast is. You have to interpret.
Oh no, the beast it's straightforward. So
who's he say? It's Satan?
No. In chapter 13, verse number 18, it tells you who the beast is.
Who is it?
It says that this calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
So who?
So the beast is Kaiser Nero.
How do you get that?
All right.
I mean, you could figure that out, but now, wait a minute. Before you look it up, I don't really want to know who it is. I mean, I'm telling you, but there's a big difference between giving you hints and saying, look, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, and all the peoples of the earth will mourn because of him. So shall it be. Amen. Christ said he will come. He said, I will come again. And he told his disciples, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me. He said, where I am going, you will come. I will come and show you the way, and I will go to prepare a place for you. I will come back and take you to be with me. So here's what I'm saying, Josh. There's a difference between saying here's this beast and here's some hints of who he is. Follow me.
Yeah.
It's a big difference between that and Jesus himself saying, I'm coming back to get you. If I go to prepare a place for you, I am coming back to get you. And there's a big difference between it's saying in Revelation that I will come again, and I will look. He is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. Who else could that be?
Well, I mean, a lot of people have been pierced. A lot of people throughout history have been.
I mean, we could say that. You could say ear piercing. I mean, I know people.
No. People who have been pierced by spears or arrows.
Yes, but
Jesus was one of many messiahs who existed in his day who tried to start revolutions against Rome who were pierced.
And do you believe that Revelation will be talking about one of those false messiahs who was killed, or they're talking about Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior?
Oh, I absolutely think that the rider on the white horse is Jesus of Nazareth.
Okay.
I absolutely think that the beast coming out of the sea is Kaiser Nero.
Okay. I could live with that.
Yeah. Ironically, Jesus is not named as the rider on the white horse.
Yes.
Nero is named as the beast. So when you're reading it, when you're not reading it in light of the whole New Testament, when you're just reading the book, there's an argument to be made that it more specifically says who the beast is than it says who the rider on the white horse is.
Is this why people say the Antichrist will come out of Rome?
Well, so Antichrist, again, that word is not in the book of Revelation.
Okay.
It's described
but
as
we know what an Antichrist is. It talks about that.
In the Gospel of Matthew, yes, we know what it means to be Antichrist. It means to be antithetical to the ways and teaching of Jesus Christ. Yes. And we take this term Antichrist from the Gospel of Matthew and we project it onto the book of Revelation here. And we say the beast is the Antichrist.
Right.
And the book of Revelation does that. The book of Revelation does some combining of things. And so for us to do it further is like, that's fair. Okay.
So is that my point is, whether they call it Antichrist or not, does the person in Revelation who comes and is causes the abomination that causes desolation, is he from Rome?
Yeah, I mean, from the preterist interpretation of Revelation, yes, it is very clearly Kaiser Nero. And it says in verse 18, chapter 13, verse 18, this calls for wisdom, basically saying, if you have some wisdom, you can figure this out. He's saying, I'm going to give you a cute little puzzle here, and you can figure it out. There was a tradition known as gematria, where we currently use Latin numbers, and we use Latin letters and Arabic numbers in English. In Hebrew, they didn't have a number system. They only used letters as their numbers, then would put a tick above the letter to indicate that it was meant to be interpreted as a number.
Okay.
And it was a very common practice. And so it's cute because the author here says his number, this is the name, it's saying this is the number of a man. This is a person, and his number is 666. Well, the number 666 spells out Kaiser Nero, and it also spells out the beast. And so it's a cute little play on words. Huh? It's both a beast and this particular person that we know about.
All right. So let's go on, because you're giving us the big picture of Revelation.
Yes.
Now, I have to ask you this, and I have to be transparent about what I'm thinking. Are you giving us your interpretation of Revelation, or are you giving us
My interpretation of Revelation can be most summarized in these two phrases, or these two terms put together in one phrase. I am an amillennial idealist. That's my interpretation
Now,
of Revelation.
you have to explain that.
Amillennial means that the millennial reign is a figurative thing, and idealist means that all of this wisdom here that was originally applied to the Empire of Rome can be applied to every empire that has come before, that was before it and has come after it.
So you don't believe, and I don't want to put you on the spot, you don't believe that there will be a tribulation.
No.
A 7-year tribulation.
I don't believe that there's going to be 7 years of badness and that before and after that badness, there was no badness. I believe that badness always has been and always will be until the very end.
It was bad.
Yeah.
But this is bad. Tribulation starts out with peace.
Sure.
A world peace, which we haven't had, really. It starts out with a leader that brings the world together and brings peace. Then comes the end of the world as we know it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and the rise and fall of empires completely reshape the world.
Yeah.
And I think, and my personal interpretation is that will continue to happen until the ultimate end.
And when is the ultimate end?
That is not for, Jesus said it's not for him to know. So I'm going to say it's definitely not for me to know.
No, I get that. But is there a climactic ending? A climactic.
Is there going to, so like at the end of a fireworks show, you can tell it's coming to an end because everything gets really epic? Like the grand finale of it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're saying, is there going to be that, like in the cosmos?
No, I'm saying, is it going to be like what the book of Revelation says it's going to be like, where the stars are falling from the sky and mountains are removed and there's earthquakes and there's rivers of blood and there's this and that.
I wholeheartedly believe that all of that is already happening and will continue to happen.
Okay. And that's interesting. And I don't know. I look at that and I look at it as saying, and folks, you look at it the way God shows you how to look at it. But I look at it as saying there's going to be this 7 years. Mm-hmm. And it's going to kick off with a person this Antichrist person who comes out of somewhere and gets everybody's attention. I mean, we know the world's getting worse. Sure. It's not getting better. But ultimately, I see Revelation as being, this is what's going to happen when Christ finally comes and assumes. I mean, we know that God said, everything is going to be under your feet. The earth will be a footstool. Everything will be yours. Sooner or later, Jesus is going to go from high priest to king. And when that comes, he's going to be the king. I don't think God is going to allow the universe to continue the way it is. Mm-hmm. That there's going to be...
the whole message of Revelation is that some justice will be brought, a punishment will be enacted, a payment will be paid in full,
and there will be a new heaven and a new earth.
Yes, yeah, that's what the book of Revelation is describing.
How do you get there from where you're believing?
All right. So we are.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
No, you're good. We're like super out of time.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All the way.
Oh, wow, we're really out of time.
All the way from chapter 4, all the way to 20. Chapter 20.
Yeah.
I don't view that as a linear timeline.
Okay.
And again, this isn't me. This is like,
that's fine.
It is where I land, but it's also like all these people that I'm studying, these textbooks I'm working through.
And I respect that. Go ahead.
So all of that can be viewed not as a horizontal timeline, but as a vertical one. All these things are happening, and we see them replaying again and again.
Right.
And we do see some repetition in the imagery and the events that are described there. And
Right.
I believe that repetition is supposed to be an indicator to us as readers that it's not meant to be a horizontal timeline, but it's just saying this is happening and this is happening. And you remember when this happened and this is going to happen. And it's just sort of bouncing around between those things. And then when we get to the end of the book, we have the happily ever after. In chapters 21 and chapter 2 are our happily ever after. And I believe that we have not yet arrived at that. I don't believe that this world we're sitting in is the perfect ideal. Jesus has brought justice to all of the injustice in the world, that every tear has been wiped away from every crying eye. I think these are beautiful images that the book of Revelation has that I'm hoping for in the future, but I don't think we're there yet.
Right.
So when we get to this happily ever after, it's a beautiful thing where it's described as there's no sun in the sky, because the glory of God brings us the light
Amen.
and the warmth and the comfort that we need. It's a beautiful thing. The river of life, that is this metaphor used again and again throughout the Bible, is described as just flowing freely, and that we are given this new and abundant life. And the final verse is, the grace of the Lord and Jesus be with all. And I think it's this beautiful happily ever after.
Yeah.
And I think that will come.
Yes.
And I think that the imagery used here in Revelation, it does a great job at it. But I think we see some similar imagery coming from the second half of Isaiah and Zephaniah. And I think it plays on some of those same themes.
In Zechariah.
Yes.
And I would say we both agree on the ending. We both agree on the author. We have a little bit of a different understanding of, or acceptance of, what we want to understand in the middle.
Yes.
How we get there.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. You have these four major frameworks of how to interpret those events in the middle. And the preterist is going to say, yes, here's how these events played out in Rome. The idealist is saying, here's how it played out in Rome. Here's how it played out in Babylon. Here's how it played out in the Ottoman Empire. Here's how it's playing out in America. The futurist will say, none of these events have happened at the epic level it's described here. And so I'm predicting that this is going to happen and this is. And
I'm not predicting anything, but I also don't want to be put in any category anymore.
That's fair.
I started to take a stand
and
in between those two.
And now your findings.
I don't want to be in any of them. Don't put me in a category.
Systematic theology that just puts things into categories and definitions is helpful, because it helps us to be able to have these finite conversations about an infinite God in an infinite universe.
Yeah.
But systematic theology is a double-edged sword. And the other side is that we can try and define God's infinite, and we can try and define things that we cannot observe and things that have yet to happen and things that we can't explain. And so, yeah, sometimes those categories are helpful because they give us a framework. Other times they're unhelpful because we feel like the edges of that framework are too restricting on what we believe and the ideas we want to explore.
Let me wrap it up by saying this. This is what God's wisdom is, so far above our wisdom.
Absolutely.
And this is what causes great discussions like this, as we try to grapple and wrestle with God's word. Someday we will know the truth, and we'll be able to look at that and go, now I see it. When we see God, when we look on him and are changed into who we are to be. But in the meantime, it's awesome to be able to sit down with a brother and have a discussion and maybe not see everything exactly the same, and still sit down and have a discussion and smile and laugh and be able to love. And I thank you for the opportunity to be able to do that.
Yeah, thank
you.
I
appreciate it.
This is great.
Yeah. And I want to thank you for joining us. I hope you found that. I hope you stay with it for as long as we did today.
Yeah, we talked about this time covering some of the enemy, the characters on the side of bad. But Joe really wanted us to take a step back and talk about this from a bigger.
Well, you wanted to too, didn't you?
I think you were once you mentioned it, I was like, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
I think Joe had a great metaphor of describing individual pieces without seeing the final assembly. And I think that is good. It's just tricky because these different interpretations see these different final assemblies. And so it's just, I'm glad that we're doing the work of getting through this. So next week, we will be getting to some more specific characters. That's fun for some people. We might contradict each other. We might contradict what you believe, but we're just doing our best to get through it. I'm not going to say that I have the ultimate interpretation.
Nor I. I just had to have something that I could anchor to.
Yeah, that's good.
And not be like a leaf in a hurricane. I would invite you to do the same thing. Yeah. Look it up for yourself. Study it. Go in depth. The Word of God is so powerful and so beyond us, but it doesn't return void. It will make a difference in your life. And so I thank you. I ask you to follow us on Apple and Spotify and all those, and hit that subscribe button. If you're on YouTube and watching us, please hit that subscribe button. Don't just be a viewer, be a part of it, be a partner with us in this, and help us to have this grow and reach more people. That's what it's all about. God bless you. Have a great week, and we will talk to you next time.